sponsored as always by Bet River Sportsbook. That is my guy, former Penn State quarterback, one of the best to do it, in my humble opinion, Christian Hackenberg. I am merely Joshua Perry. We got a hot show coming for you today. Not a ton to recap. I mean, if we're being completely honest, a little bit of a dog shit weekend. Couple of surprising results, but overall, like, not too much action. I think it was more of a scary Saturday for some teams that maybe got into a little bit more of a tussle than they had expected. But Hack, how you doing this week, man? What's a good word?
I'm good, man. We're back in the morning. To your point, there's probably going to be a few moments where I look like a complete ass based upon what I said last week for some of these recaps, which is fine. You know, I'll eat my shit sandwich every once in a while.
Yeah.
But to your point, you know, kind of a tough slate to begin with. Not to make excuses for us, you know, tough slate to begin with. But we'll see what happens. I think it's going to get better for us here towards the end of the year, finishing things up. But other than that, dude, been wheeling and dealing, traveling a little bit for work. Excited to get back on the pod with my guy.
Yeah.
So
No, this is one of the most enjoyable things that I do professionally all week. So definitely appreciate it. I love to hear that you're wheeling and dealing too, man. I have an image in my mind right now of you in one of your, 12 to 15 suits, got the hair all done up, wheeling and dealing, moving and shaking, rubbing elbows with the important people.
Yeah, you know, you go in there, you play it low key, you know, some people might recognize you, some people might not, because I'm still like just not far enough removed yet from the game. So it's kind of cool. And then, that's an easy in. And then, you just play it cool, know what you got to do, deliver on what you say you can deliver on, and keep it moving,
So the one of the things, as an aside here, that enhanced my business profile more than anything else was not the fact that I played ball, but it was when people started seeing my ugly mug on the television. They were like, "Oh, you're the guy from the TV." And then that's when I was able to kind of start wheeling and dealing myself. Ended up closing a couple more deals off the fact that I had a familiar face. People like working with a trustworthy face, because there's a lot of snakes out here in the business world. So definitely something to lean into. I will echo what you said just a second ago, though, on the football side of things, man. Every once in a while, you got to eat a shit sandwich, and it's totally fine. That's what we're here to do. I think it actually becomes better when you got to go ahead and eat your words a little bit. So we'll do some of that, but we got some really great stuff to dive into topically, outside of recapping games. Like, there are some really unique storylines, both in the Big Ten and nationally, that I think you guys will appreciate our takes on. So dive into some of the scores from the weekend, starting with Minnesota and their win over Nebraska. The score of that one is 20-13. Number 2, Ohio State goes into a windy Evanston, and they beat Northwestern 21-7. You've got Iowa over Purdue 24-3. The Iowa offense just as explosive as can be. Purdue, not even a thought in my mind at this point, because I won't let my emotions get the best of me. You've got Wisconsin 23 over Maryland's 10. You've got Michigan State over Illinois, number 16 at the time, pulling off the upset. The score of that one, 23-15. Number 15 Penn State at the time going into Indiana. Score of that one, 45-14. And Hack, I don't think it was as close as the score indicates there. And then finally, Michigan over Rutgers. Michigan moving up to the 4th spot nationally now, 52-17. Don't want to recap entirely too much, but I do want to give a little bit of love to Penn State. It's interesting what the perspective on them is probably nationally, because the two games that people outside of the footprint would have really watched are the games against Michigan and Ohio State. And it's a situation where both of those teams are now in the CFP top 4. Penn State certainly, I think, battled Ohio State a lot better, although that game got a little bit out of hand in the 4th quarter. But when you watch this team against other competition, and Indiana isn't a great football team, let's be completely clear about that. But there are a lot of things to like here, man. And this is a team that is probably going to and should win 10 games this year. And I know that folks are frustrated that they haven't been able to get over the hump against some of those top 10 teams. I understand that frustration. But it's a really interesting team because if you're not locked in and you haven't watched a ton, you think that they're not great, but they're still really good.
No, they're very sound. They're a solid team. They got a lot of youth in the skill positions. I'm trying to look up. That's my bad for not doing the homework, but I'm trying to
No,
look up
you're
how
all
young
good.
their O line is. I know they have one kid who's probably going to get drafted here this year, if not next year, at the tackle spot, who's done a really good job. But that's been my biggest question mark with Penn State is the physicality, because to me, you have the Ohio State, which they're physical up front, big, they have bodies, but they're more of that sexy. And we've talked about this, how Penn State's kind of gone to match the athleticism of Ohio State sideline to sideline. I think
Yep.
that's why you saw a much closer game against Ohio State. And then Michigan's kind of gone
100%.
the polar opposite, where they've become super, super physical, great backs, and we're just going to pound it, play super, super physical, downhill attack, aggressive defense. And Penn State struggle with that. And it's like weird because when growing up as a football fan, a college football fan, Penn State was kind of like the combination of both, right? Like they had really physical guys in certain positions that were really key. And then they kind of had some guys outside that can make plays in different positions and can run sideline to sideline. So it was like, I think they need to get back to that footprint. And I think that'll give them the best chance when you're talking about roster compilation or, putting your roster together. But to me, the youth of this team is what's the brightest point moving forward. And the nice thing is, I think they've done a great job developing Drew Allar, getting him reps, putting him in situations to be successful. He's been experiencing some success. And to be honest with you, they did that with Clifford too, early on. So really, really good. Excited to see what the future holds specifically for him. And then the rest of those young guys, Nick Singleton, that the whole backfield. So
no, I mean, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, both of those guys are great. I agree with you on Drew. Quarterback position, definitely a bright future. And I mean, this as well as anybody, but for folks who haven't seen him up close, the way that the guy is built, he looks like your prototype at quarterback. And he's got all of the physical skills development, certainly going to be key there. And then on the defensive side, when I was at training camp this year, I mean, some of the young defensive linemen that aren't in the rotation right now, they got some legitimate skill, and specifically on the interior of that D line. I know that's been a point of emphasis there in terms of recruiting, but those are guys who can hold up at the point of attack, but they can also get you a nice pass rush. Great athletes, can be disruptive from the interior. That's what I'm looking forward to there. So yeah, I mean, it's going
to be interesting to see how they replace their defensive backfield too.
Yes,
because they've leaned on those guys heavy, and they've been there for a long time. And you would think that they'd have something in the pipeline for sure.
I mean, it seems like that has been kind of where they have made their hay, though. It's like finding those guys in the back end with the measurables, with the physical traits. And then, I mean, they've done a great job of teaching technique and fundamentals to those guys, too. So
T-Smalls, it's my guy, Terry Smith.
I'm telling you, though, I think that I don't worry about that personally. And I don't know what they have there. I trust what they've been able to do. And not for nothing, this is a team that also went down south, played Auburn, who's a bad team, but they really laid it on them. They played them better than some of those teams down there in the SEC. So, I mean, if we're really contextualizing this roster and this season here, like, I know people are a little bit down, and I totally understand it, but like, let's put things in perspective real quick. Very unique team to me. We're not going to recap any of these games. I mean, how much is there really to talk about with some of these games? We'll get into some of these big storylines, though, and it'll kind of get into what we saw over the weekend. But we'll start with Illinois before we get into some of the teams over there in the East. And I want to get your thoughts on what you made of the game, because as I look at it, and I did my breakdown on it, you start to look at the stats, and Illinois was really in control of the game statistically. It's when you start to boil down two things to me. Third and fourth down, critical downs, Illinois was not great. I think they were 6 of 17 on third downs. I don't believe they converted a fourth down in the game.
1 of 6.
Yes. Okay. So they got 1 fourth down in the game. Thank you for that. That's not where you want to be, especially as a team that is probably going to win the West and have to compete against somebody from the East in the Big Ten Championship. Like, those situations you got to have, but also the red zone troubles for them, man. It's been all year, but they had one touchdown out of 4 red zone trips. That is not cutting it. And on the season, they haven't been great down there. I'm going to get you this number real quick, so stand by here.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to get into those games where we're talking critical situations, their touchdown percentage in the red zone, 40%. That is 13 out of 14 Big Ten teams. To put that
Probably
into
Iowa
context,
is the only one underneath them.
Iowa is the only one underneath them. And to put that into context, the top 3 teams in the conference in Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State in terms of red zone touchdowns basically have doubled it up in terms of percentage. Not a spot that you want to be in, my guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. And like to dive deeper, I mean, Illinois outgained them 440 yards to 294. You brought up a great thing. Michigan State was 3 of 11 on third down. Wasn't like they were great.
Nope.
They punted the ball 5 times to Illinois' 3. They had 7. Michigan State had 7 penalties for 77 yards to Illinois' 4 for 39. Mm-hmm. So like turnover was 1 for 1. Time of possession was Illinois 32 to 28. But like you sit there and you look at that, you're like, damn, like these guys really must have done something to really F this up. And to your point, I think you bring up a really important thing that a lot of people overlook in the red zone efficiency, because when you get down there, especially if you're a team like Illinois, who, you know, yes, you have Chase Brown, who's an explosive player, did his thing a little bit, 4 yards of carry, had 130 something yards, but he got it 30 something times. You know, he's your explosion. And when you get down there, you have to figure out creative ways, whether it be using tight ends, whether it be using him as a decoy with a lot of action, a lot of misdirection, get eyes going somewhere else and confuse people. So it's tough when you don't have that guy who can win one-on-ones down there, you know, getting a run heavy set, have a guy who's going to continually win one-on-ones against some of the bigger dogs in the conference, because that's going to help your red zone efficiency for sure when you're just playing matchup ball. So really, a unique thing that Illinois got to overcome. But again, it's like the story of the West, right? Like we've talked about this for now a couple of years. The West is going to be the West, and they're behind the East.
They are behind. And this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the red zone, because Michigan's had trouble as well. And I think when you start to look at these teams, you can draw a parallel. Illinois tied for 8th in the Big Ten in passing plays over 20 yards. Michigan sitting there tied for 10th in the Big Ten at passing plays over 20 yards. And in the field, I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to stress the safeties, right? Because it opens everything up. It opens up underneath passing game. It opens up run game. Those guys can't be fast downhill in the box there. And those teams have not consistently done that. And in the red zone, the field shrinks. The dimensions totally change. And now, as a former defender, one of the things that I know a lot of teams want to do is like they feel like they can play cover 2 down there because they can get hard rolled up corners that can, get jams at the line of scrimmage. They can also fit into the run game. And their safeties can be a little bit more flat footed and downhill if they need to be, because there's just not that space where anybody can run by them. Do you think that their troubles out in the field in terms of threatening safeties affect the way that teams can play them when the field gets tight, in terms of when they want to get big and they want to run it and hand it off to Chase Brown? Those safeties can trigger right now because they're not getting there. I mean, you're running out of space to threaten them anyway.
It's like the best situation possible. It's 1/4-0 combination. You know what I mean? Like you have no responsibility, to your point of getting burned over the top. The geometry completely changes. So there's a lot of issues in there. That's kind of my point. Like when you don't have somebody who is just a flat out, because then, if you have a team like that, like I'm going to spread you the fuck out. Like I'm going to be like, all right, let's spread it out. Let's see if I can make you dictate how many hats outside of the safeties, right, are going to be dictated to the box and protecting the run. Like I'm going to spread you guys out as much as I can, use motions to tip your hands, see if you're going to be bracketing a certain guy, like spread the people out, see the picture. And then from there, I think they're disciplined enough. You could do the whole window dressing with explosion shifts, motions, all that stuff. And you got to get creative. Now you're talking different situations when you're in like the mid red, high red, low red, right? But, just specifically that kind of like 10-yard line area, like I'd spread them out, figure it out, see what you can get. You know what I mean? And then try to find your matchup. And, I'd leverage Chase Brown a lot more in the passing game because at the end of the day, he's either going to have a safety or a linebacker on him. And then if it's true zone, even in quarters, he's still going to be working off a linebacker, especially in the slot. And that's a matchup that I'd take advantage of all day long. So, I go back to it. I've hit this point over and over again. Offensive football is pretty simple, man. It's numbers, leverage, and matchups. And if you can figure out ways to take advantage of one of those three things at any point in time, you're going to put yourself in a situation to be successful as long as your guys execute.
Yeah, interestingly enough, defensive football is about the same thing: numbers, leverage, and matchups, right? So, you're playing the same game. Obviously, one person's going to come out on the winning end of that, but certainly two interesting things to look at is what they did on 3rd and 4th downs. I think that's probably more correctable than the red zone troubles that they've had all year. But that moving forward, probably the biggest point of emphasis for me when it comes to evaluating this Illinois team. I want to move it over to the East. You had Ohio State playing Northwestern over there. And I think one of the biggest storylines that comes out of that football game is the weather and how it had an impact. And I don't like to use weather as an excuse because Northwestern had to play in the same elements, right? So level playing field from that standpoint. I'm also not stupid, and I understand that the weather probably affects one of the teams more than the other, just in terms of what they like to do game plan wise. Sorry, I had to look something up here real quick. But I need from the quarterback's point of view, from your perspective, when you're getting winds out there, they said, top end 50 mile an hour. I know that there were some pretty aggressive gusts of wind. How much does that change your ability and effectiveness in the pass game?
Well, it's funny. It depends. There's guys who throw the ball fantastic into the wind. There's an old story from one of my former coaches about Tom Brady. They were playing New England playoff game. It's blowing 40. Tom Brady takes the ball into the wind, first play, drop back, play action, throws a 20-yard comeback right into that motherfucker, hits him in the chin and keeps it going. It kind of sets the tempo of the game, right? If you have a quarterback who's confident enough in those situations, self-confident enough, does things the right way. A lot of guys let that seep into their brain. And now we're going to be talking more like take the physical tools out of it. It becomes testicular fortitude and mental fortitude type of situation now, and it's the intangibles of the quarterback in the position. See, if it gets in your brain, you're done. It's like a wet ball. It's the same thing. If the elements get in your brain, you're done. So you need to be able to overcome that. Again, though, there's some drastic situations where if it's blowing 50, 60, 70, probably don't want to be throwing it into that consistently. Like you're not dropping me back 50 times into that stuff. Right. And that's something as a coach that you need to do. And to your point, this Ohio State team struggled running the football consistently. Do they have big play potential in that? 100%. But I think a lot of that big play potential still comes from the threat of them being able to throw it and take the top off.
Right.
And when that's out of the elements, you see a team get put in a different situation. Now, to Ohio State's credit, and CJ Stroud's credit specifically, figured out different ways to do it, right? Kid used his legs, became an extra threat from the backfield that the defense had to start accounting for. And I'd like to see Ohio State add that wrinkle in there with him, because even when you're in great situations where you can throw it, having CJ run the football 5 to 10 times a game is going to help your run game right now for the exact same reason that I mentioned. Now the defense has to account for him. And that's kind of going back to your era with JT Barrett. Like JT liked to sit in the pocket, but JT could get off. And then even before that with Braxton, that was their whole game, right? Like he was a run first guy with the ability to throw the ball. So going back into that stuff, maybe mixing that in moving forward to help your run game and give it a little bit of a boost is what I'd look Ohio State to do.
Yeah, and I don't even think that CJ needs to run as many times as you said. I think 4 to 8 times in a game is enough to keep a defense on its heels and to probably get one of those or even 2 of those to be a run over 15 yards. I think that's all it takes. I'm with you on the win too, just in terms of game plan. They threw it 26 times in the game. I don't think that's an egregious number of times, maybe a little bit much in those conditions. But I would also point to this. I thought that there were only maybe 3 or 4 passes that really sailed because of the wind. You could tell that the wind got the best of it. I counted at least 6 drops that hit a wide receiver right in the hands,
Mm-hmm.
right in the freaking hands, and they didn't catch it. And I tweeted this during the game. Some Ohio State fans were like, "Oh, shut up, you old stodgy son of a bitch." But I tweeted that the wide receivers needed to take their gloves off. And I don't know if you were ever in a locker room where you had a coach that said, when it's wet and raining outside, the wide receivers should not wear sleeves and they should not wear the gloves. And as you probably know, like you spit on them, you rub them together. Once they're dry, they get real tacky. But when they're wet, those things are as slick as can be.
Yeah.
And, I'm watching the ball go right through these guys' hands and like they're wearing gloves out here. I'm like, bro, like let's get old school. Like your body, this is me being a weirdo, but your hands, when, for example, you're in a swimming pool, you're in the bathtub too long, they get
Mm-hmm.
pruny.
Mm-hmm.
They do that because that is your body's natural adaptation to be able to grip things better. Your fingers prune up to grip better when they are wet. So your body has a built-in mechanism to help you when the conditions are not optimal. You know what the gloves don't have? A built-in mechanism to help you when the conditions aren't optimal. And so I sit back and I watch the number of drops that happened in that game. And that's a big part of this game plan. Like, we can talk about win, and obviously that has an impact. But I look at lack of focus, maybe from just a competitive advantage
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, like maybe a lack of preparation, and like, okay, what's plan B for our guys when their gloves are slick?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that probably chapped my ass the most about this. But you dive into the run game, and I think that it was much uglier than the stats actually provide, because when you really get down to it, and there are long runs in there, but every team in their rushing total, long runs account for what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They ran it for 6 yards a carry. Like that's a good number, and especially when CJ started running it.
Yep.
What Northwestern did defensively, I thought was the best game plan they've had all year, in terms of
They're
getting
good
their
for like one of
safeties.
those a year against a really good
Good
team.
for one
No
of them
matter
a year.
what, no matter what their record is, no matter how they're playing, they're good for one of those a year.
They are, but it was defensive line, get vertical, like doesn't matter if you get behind in a gap,
Yeah.
get vertical. Linebackers run through where you see space, and the safeties were just creeping down to the line of scrimmage, and they're running through as well. And once CJ started pulling the ball, the linebackers and the safeties are like, Coach, we can't do this like this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that is exactly what you need, just that hesitation, because then CJ had his run, and next thing you know, Mayan Williams is breaking off a big run for a touchdown. Next thing you know, Emeka Egbuka can get in there and he can have himself a nice run on an end around. Like, all of a sudden, it's a whole new wide open offense in terms of the run game. CJ Stroud has to run the football. It's a non-negotiable
Yeah.
from this point forward to me.
You make a great point, and I think you can attest to this as a defender. Like that split second, especially when you're dealing with an athlete like Mayan Williams, when you're dealing with an athlete like Travion Henderson,
Can't do it.
and then flip it on the other side. Other guys around the conference, Blake Corum, Nick Singleton, Chase Brown. That half a second is a lifetime when you're talking to a linebacker and being able to be in position, or it becomes an arm tackle that he runs through, right?
Yep.
And that's something that I think, as a fan, listeners, everyone around the world should pay attention to those things, because these guys are all great athletes, but some are a little bit more talented than others, and being in position to make those plays comes down to just timing, confidence, and preparation. And also, the Bill Nye, the science guy, Joshua Perry, coming out here with some science lessons was fantastic. And the one thing I will say about that is you got to go with the old school Newman leathers in the rain. You need the leathers in the rain, and they don't have it on. They don't have it. Get you some Newmans.
But
all
see,
you guys, Marvin Harrison Jr. He should know that, because his daddy played in that NFL.
Yep.
The NFL's got the plug with those. Scratch out that end, put a check on it, get your guy to draw a check on it, and here we go.
That's the thing. You just put the tape around the deal and you draw the check on it. I'm totally with you there. And the thing about the leather, man, that is a natural fiber. That is a natural textile. So that's one, I'm with you, but like, it's so funny because, like, I mean, I'm 28 years old, but like, I feel like we're super old school when it comes to philosophy and stuff like that. And it's really that idea of like I had coaches that used to say when it's wet out, you're not wearing sleeves because like the ball can come loose on it.
Even when it's cold out,
Yeah,
like
you're
we
gonna slip
like,
off of tackles.
yeah,
Like, you know,
dry.
when the elements aren't right, like you gotta take those gloves off. If you think you're gonna be able to grip the football, like you're stupid.
Yeah,
So anyway, that's me being on my old man soapbox during the game. People were like,
there
"Oh,
you go.
shut up!" But I had to get that off my chest. It was pissing me off.
That's great.
All right, Michigan, real quick here, man. Are people making too much of their first half? They went into the locker room down 17-14 against Rutgers. You know, it's a Rutgers team that hasn't had a lot of success doing much of anything offensively. And they had the big special teams play. I
Yep.
don't want to breeze by that, but they also had three explosive passes in the first half of that football game, one for 37, one for 16, one for 48. And I had mentioned before, if I was going to test this Michigan team, I would do it on their corners.
Yep.
Were people making too much of the first half performance out of Michigan?
I don't think so. I think it's worth a evaluation, right? Because Michigan's been through the ringer now. They've had a couple of these. They had the similar situation with Indiana, who's another bad football team, as we said. But again, good teams figure it out, and good teams can make adjustments and make plays and overcome some things because that special teams play is massive. That's a massive momentum changer, no matter who you are, no matter where you're playing. And it's funny, we had a text chain with a bunch of the guys that are on this show and on the After Dark show, and someone says, hey, big play, punt block, and I said they're gonna need about 3 more of them bitches before the end of this one if they're gonna pull this off, because that's the kind of thing that you need to happen when you're talking about two programs where they are, and just from a Jimmy's and Joe's standpoint. And Michigan proved that in the second half, right? And I keep going back to it, like the game I got circled that's going to be the teller of all tales with both of these programs in the East is the Ohio State Michigan game. You're going to find out. And it's top to bottom program. It's going to be a program win. Whoever wins it, it's going to be coaching staff doing a fantastic job, players executing, and mentalities clashing, and which one comes out of it is going to dictate the best representation of the Big Ten in the college football playoff, because both of these guys are worthy when you just watch it, but we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally there with you. I think people made entirely too much of the first half. I think it was a Rutgers team, and we know how Greg Schiano is, and he was going to be aggressive. He was going to come
Great
out
ball
swinging. That's
coach.
what you got to do in a game like that. Like, you got to get your guys up early in that game to even have a shot, right? They're not coming back in a game like that.
Yeah.
So I chalk it up to that. I think Michigan's been one of the best teams in America in second half adjustments. But this is where, if I was a Michigan fan, I would have maybe a little trepidation. Is Ohio State, you can't do that
no
nasty first half thing, because we have seen this Ohio State team be productive in first halves of games. They're averaging 24 points in the first half. In home games, they're averaging 27 damn near, and they're playing that game in Columbus. You look at Michigan in the first half of games, away games, they're only averaging 12 points, right? So this is something you can't do. And we've also seen that Ohio State is a team that will take it to the fourth quarter and try to blow it open too. That is the one point of caution, is that game has to be a fast start for both teams, but specifically Michigan on the road must be a fast start. I don't worry about that team, though, because they have been so steady and consistent, and their game plan is one of those where they stick to it, and it always ends up working. But against Ohio State, that's one team that you can't get behind on. Flip side of that, for Ohio State, like early on that game, you get punched in the mouth, you can't, back into a corner. Like, this is going to be a dogfight. I have no expectation of anything otherwise, but I don't make too much of it. I think that Michigan has been a phenomenally consistent team. This is getting into the national perspective here with the CFP rankings.
Yeah.
Coming out of this past week, I would have had Michigan as my number 2 team in the country, just based off of that consistency that I've seen. Ohio State, I think, gives you so much more at the top end, but can they get to that top end is the question. And when they're kind of at their floor, they make for some ugly football games that, if you're somebody who follows the team closely, will give you heartburn. But getting into the CFP top 10 here, you got UGA at 1, that game that they had against Tennessee. To me, The score did not indicate the ass whooping that happened there. And my personal thoughts on it is if there wasn't weather in that game in the second half, UGA probably scores 3 more touchdowns like that. I mean, second half passing game, they pretty much said, we're just going to go away from it. We got a nice lead. We can grind this game out. Love what they did. Ohio State at number 2, Michigan at number 3. 2 most intriguing ones for us as Big Ten guys. That thing sorts itself out. But again, both of these teams are top end football teams. People need to understand that. TCU at 4, Tennessee at 5, Oregon 6, LSU sitting there at 7, highest ranked 2-loss team. USC at 8, which I think is really interesting. No CFP top 25 wins. UCLA, I think, has a better resume. They're sitting at 12. It's not for us to talk about. This isn't a Pac-12 show, but those are going to be Big Ten teams, so I felt like mentioning it. Bama at 9. Clemson sitting there at 10, and that still might be a little bit too high for that weak-ass team. Penn State sitting at 14. Illinois at 21. Let me just get your overarching thoughts on what the CFP did here.
Yeah, I thought they did a great job, right? And I made just because of what Clemson got where they were last week due to the fact of historical success and a logo, and they got punched in the damn mouth. And I think people were like, okay, we now can throw the historical data out, and the team is what they are. They are who we thought they were this whole year, at least me watching them. To your point with this Georgia team, you know, I ate this on the podcast. You know, I picked Tennessee. I was kind of rolling with that whole like Joe Burrow, LSU, America's team, America's sweetheart, getting it done. And this Georgia team, who I was super high on last year and I've been really quiet on this year, showed the growth and maturity of a program. When the lights come on, big stage, they're going to come out and give them their best. And I thought they did a great job of forcing Tennessee to be something that they weren't. They were forcing Tennessee to play the game underneath coverage, eliminating explosives, having to grind it out. Even that third quarter, Tennessee had like a 10-minute drive that they didn't get any points out of. And when Tennessee doesn't have time and they start eating up time on offense because their defense is not that great, it does not play into their hand. Georgia truly dictated that game top to bottom from the very beginning. From the jump in every aspect, took advantage of turnovers, which Tennessee hadn't been doing. It was just, to your point, a thorough ass whooping. And that team, I think, is leaps and bounds above a lot of teams in college football, even though they had their scares and they had their moments. I just think that they're a more mature team, more veteran team, been there, done that in those situations. When the lights come on, you never see Georgia flinch. They never flinch when the lights are bright. And that's something that I've got to see out of this Ohio State team. And that's something that we have to see out of this Michigan team, because I think they're probably the 2 biggest threats to Georgia right now in college football.
The interesting thing about what Georgia did, and the way I would sum up that game, is they out-physicaled and out-skilled Tennessee. And I think you can win a football game getting out-physicaled, even though it's going to be tough and it's nasty football, but you can do it. And you can win a football game getting out-skilled. We see that constantly. But UGA took the physicality and they brought their skill. What they did to Tennessee's offense, and people were talking about how this was a prolific offense, is one of the best that we've seen in however many years, whatever the case is. Couldn't block them up front. And this was a Georgia team that people said couldn't generate sacks. They said, okay, we'll take your little narrative and shove it up our ass.
6 of them.
No, I mean, it was wild there. And then just like you said, Tennessee could not be explosive. They couldn't do it. And
they had their chances though too, but they missed. Did. And that's something that they've done all year though, is that they've thrown it down the field vertically so well that they've missed 5 or 6 a game, and people didn't flinch because they hit 5 or 6.
Well,
you can't do that against a Georgia team.
But then Hendon Hooker did not see the field well after that pass rush really started getting on him, because there were opportunities. Like, this is the thing that when you watch coaches copy a tape, and you've seen it from being in the quarterback seat and then also being a coach, like, there are many opportunities where a dude wins on a route and the quarterback just cannot see it, where he's not looking at the right things because he's worried about the pressure that's getting ready to hit him. That happened to Tennessee, and it was wild to see how Georgia really manipulated that aspect there. I mean, that was certainly the game of the week. That was the thing to talk about nationally. Our teams are in good position, but it brings up a conversation because you talk about strength of schedule, and I think Ohio State really did get the boost by Notre Dame being back in there at number 20. But like, Michigan's still in the top three. They played absolutely nobody. Colorado State, you had Hawaii, you had UConn, who's much better than expected, but it's not really moving the
You're
needle
talking out
for
of
people
conference,
nationally.
correct?
Yes, out of
Yep.
conference. And then you got Ohio State in the non-con again. You had the Notre Dame win, but you got Arkansas State and Toledo in there, like a couple of sleeper games that you basically get to walk through. And to me, like the Notre Dame game maybe was a deciding factor in the 2 versus 3 conversation. Did Ohio State minimal favors at this point? Like it's not really a resume booster. And Michigan, the teams that they played certainly aren't going to boost resumes. You get the wins, and I think winning's the most important thing right now for a lot of people. Like strength of schedule, I don't think is a deciding factor for many folks in that room specifically. And then I look at a team like Oregon, who schedules Georgia in a neutral site game that was basically a home game for Georgia, first game of the year. And had they not done that, Kirk Herbstreit said it the best. You schedule Portland State, and all of a sudden we're having a conversation about Oregon sitting there at number 4, maybe at number 3. Like we don't know what happens there. Maybe at number 2, honestly, the way that they've played since that Georgia game has been as good as anybody.
Here's the other thing. People got to start throwing Bo Nix's name in this Heisman conversation because that son of a bitch has been playing football. Since that game, he's been playing some good football.
Statistically, the second best quarterback in terms of touchdown production outside of CJ Stroud since that first game. Like, yeah, I'm totally there with you. He needs to get more hype.
And that Georgia game was a straight setup. I mean, it's a neutral site game in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the heart of Georgia country. Like, come on,
brand new head coach who's
Dan Lanning
going
coming
up against,
from Georgia.
Yes, his guy. Like it was that whole thing to me. I think the games matter. I don't want to devalue games, but like as I start to look in the rear view, that was a long time ago. Like the situation was definitely not optimal for that Oregon team. But it basically goes to say, man, that you do yourself minimal favors trying to go out there and have a nice schedule, in my opinion, in this current setup.
And I think
that's all I wanted to say.
The other thing too, for the first time, I think there's a legitimate argument to not put 2 SEC teams in the college football playoff this year.
I'm with you 100%.
Which is going to make for a very interesting finish here, because if you have a TCU team who slips up, because they still have a couple more challenges. I think they're
at Texas this week.
Which is a very, very scary team. Very, very scary team. I think they're starting to turn the corner. I love this Quinn Ewers kid. I've been high on him all year. Shown some growing pains, but I think it's there. I think that's going to be Oregon could really slip in here if they keep handling business, because they're going to have some high profile games against the Lincoln Riley and USC team in the college in their conference championship game. So they've still got some shots. They've still got some shots here to make a case and even slip in there and possibly get that rematch with Georgia. So.
No, I'm totally there with you. Like this is going to be interesting down the line. I think the one where we start having the conversation about the resumes of Ohio State and Michigan is if there would be an opportunity for a 1-loss Big Ten team to get in. If Notre Dame keeps playing the way that they can, I think Notre Dame can get the win against USC at the end of the year too. If they rush for 220 or more yards in that game, it's a victory. You can mark it down right now. Then that bolsters Ohio State's resume. Michigan's not going to have that. I think the only time we start talking about their out of conference schedule is when we get into this conversation about can 2 Big Ten teams get in. Now, Michigan is going to have the added benefit of having Illinois on their schedule. And I think that Illinois still as a 4-loss team could be ranked at the very bottom of that top 25 or a 3-loss team, whatever the case. There would be a 3-loss team at that point. They have a Big Ten championship potentially in there too that they would be in. All that to say, Michigan would have that data point. Like there are some interesting things there, but I think that's the only time we start talking about this. Otherwise, those 2 teams having not really had a test out of conference, you feel like they're still in a good spot.
Yep.
All right, get to some previews and get you out of here. Betting lines, as always, provided by Bet Rivers Sportsbook. We got Purdue at Illinois. This is one of the big ones for Illinois because if they win this game and they beat Northwestern, then they make it to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship for the first time in this format. Illinois favored by 6.5. Total on that one is 44.5. Here's the thing for me. what I've seen out of Purdue, you know exactly where I'm going. Stop shaking your head. What I've seen out of Purdue, and Illinois being a salty team that just lost a game that they shouldn't have lost, they're going to get boat raced. They are going to get run off of the damn field. It's just my personal opinion. That's all I got to say on that.
Yeah. I cursed Aiden O'Connell. It's on me. I started talking all this cash money shit about my guy. I cursed him. Still think he's a great player. Shit. Yeah, I still think he's a great player.
You know what I noticed on tape?
Got a bright future.
I don't think he trusts the guys blocking for him. His mechanics are a little bit out of whack right now.
Yeah, it's hard to blame him. He starts getting hit. Yeah, and I've been there. Trust me. You know just as well as anybody. I've been there. That's a dark hole.
He's not setting his feet.
But yeah, I think this Illinois team's going to come in pissed off. And I just want to stay away from any football game involved with the University of Purdue at this moment. I don't even want to talk about it. They make me sick because as much shit as we're talking right now, they could come out and play the best game they've played all year.
Yeah, and that's the thing where I'm going to get burned, and I'm going to have to come on here next week and make my apologies. But I'm just saying that they're getting boat race. I'm confident in saying that.
I'm cool with you standing on that.
I'm confident that I don't have confidence in that team. Let me put it like that.
I'm confidently not confident in anything having to do with Purdue.
Yeah. All right. You got Wisconsin at Iowa. Wisconsin 1.5 point favorite in this one. The total is 35, so that's kind of a nasty game there. This is what intrigues me about that matchup is Wisconsin defense over the last couple of games has been much improved, and that was a young group coming in, replacing 8 starters. Jim Leonard had a lot on his plate going from just being a D coordinator to being an interim head coach, but those guys are fully bought in, and I love the way they're playing ball right now. Iowa,
that was one of those things that scared me was the Michigan game. It was the Maryland game. But go ahead. I want you to finish your point.
But Iowa with this, and it's been a lot of the same, but this offense has been clicking. I mean, you got explosion of offense. Yeah. Young running back from the great state of Ohio out there making plays, 200 yards rushing last week. You got Spencer Brady Petras out there throwing the rock around the field. I mean, is this, it's been 2 weeks now. Is this the new Iowa or is it just fool's gold?
I don't know, man. I don't trust Iowa either. Iowa's another one with, the thing is I think they haven't seen a defense like Wisconsin, the points that you brought up, for quite some time now. And I think it's allowed them to get a little bit of confidence. Do I think that they're going to play better than they did at the beginning of the year? Yes. But this Wisconsin team has showed me a lot of growth since Jim Leonard has taken over in terms of playing physical, playing with a little bit more energy, playing with a little bit more focus and attention to detail. A lot more energy. Still Graham Mertz is he was like 5 for 17 for 77 yards or something stupid like that.
Yeah. I'll give him the weather.
Didn't turn it over though.
Yeah. All right. So here's
the wild card I will say with Wisconsin is Braylon Allen. Like he's a really good player who we haven't talked enough about since the beginning of the year. And I think that ultimately he is going to be the driving factor of this game. Can Wisconsin just play their style of ball, control the thing, have a couple turnovers? If they get that, if Iowa turns the ball over, I think it's a Wisconsin football game.
So here's what I've got for you. You see, this is my nice sheet of notes here. Great penmanship, by the way, because I give a fuck. Girly blue pen because I couldn't find my other dark blue or black pen. So give me the benefit of the doubt on that. Here's what I have in my notes because you were talking about Graham Mertz. So this is what it came down to, just coming through games and looking at stats. All right, so if Graham Mertz completes 60 or more % of his passes, he has 9 or more yards per attempt and no interceptions, they're going to win the football game. They've only won one football game where he's thrown an interception. So he's got to be 60% plus. That is the absolute bottom of what he can do. 9 yards per attempt, no picks, and they win the football game. So I think this is one of those games where it really comes down to Graham Mertz, and they're going up against this Iowa defense, man, that has a knack for making quarterbacks look out of character. So that's what I'll be looking at the most.
There you go.
All right. And then finally, you got Maryland at Penn State. Penn State favored by 10. Totals 59 in this one. Maryland disappointed me last week, certainly, and I know that the elements didn't help them whatsoever, but everybody's playing in those same elements. Penn State, like I said, 10-win season on the line here. Maryland's a team that has not had a lot of success in November, and their schedule is certainly backloaded, and that hasn't helped them out. But as I look at this can be a statement for either team because I think that Penn State has an opportunity in a game like this to win it emphatically. They could win it by more than 10 points. I also think that Maryland has the tools to pull off an upset against a team like Penn State. So I'd like to hear what you have to say on that.
I don't disagree with you, but I think the way this Penn State team's playing, I think James knows how important a 10-win season for him this year is. New AD, there's a lot of things on the back end that play into that. So for me, I think this Penn State team's going to come out pissed off, focused, and raring for a shot to put themselves in a New Year's Six bowl. And I think Penn State covers and wins this.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Easily.
I mean, it's one of those, like I said, I mean, either Penn State could run away with it. If Maryland gets a perfect game plan, I think that they can make it interesting too. But I'm leaning more toward the fact that I trust Penn State more than I trust Maryland in this matchup. Just as notes here, Ohio State is hosting Indiana and Michigan hosts Nebraska. Not really very interesting game, so I wanted to put that on everybody's radar. All right, before I get you out of here, haven't talked about this. I was thinking about this the other day because as the season starts to drag on, if you are a young player, your mind is absolutely fucked right now. You're totally warped. You're swimming academically. You thought you might have had a chance to play. Now you're just running the scout team during practice, not really bought into that. Your body is in shambles and you've never experienced that before. You probably miss mommy and daddy to a certain standpoint. Your mind is fucked up. And thinking about young players at this point in the year brought me back to a point of thinking about when you first got to campus as a young player. And I think everybody has a welcome to college football moment. Hack, what was your welcome moment?
So it's interesting. I'm going to take mine like early into summer when I first got there because I had the fortune of being a starter, and Coach O'Brien treated us like pros. So throughout the year, we really took it in the chin early, but then it was about keeping us healthy, keeping us confident, keeping us ready to play on Saturdays, which was great. So I towards the end of the year, it actually got easier for me, especially mentally and everything that I was doing. I put a lot of effort into it academically, still in those, core curriculum classes, knocking those out fairly easily, a lot of big lecture hall things. So that wasn't too big of an issue for me. But I vividly remember simply because I think Coach O'Brien saw the potential of me being able to be the quarterback early when I came in there due to our depth chart. I got thrown in with the older guys for summer workais immediately. I didn't get the freshmen like, hey, this is how we fundamentally squat all day, and then an easy little workout and kind of ease you into it. I got thrown into like a squat clean deadlift day. Like 85% of the max with, a heavy dose of conditioning afterwards with the entire starting offensive line who was like Ty Howe, John Urschel, like 5th-year seniors. John Urschel was teaching classes at this point in time on campus. So all these guys been through it, right? And here comes, 6'4", 215, fresh coming out of high school, string bean C-hack, right? And so we get done with the lift, and I'm like, I'm a tough guy. Like, I've been through some crazy shit, and my parents were tough on me, and I lifted hard, worked out hard, and I'm like, whew, that was a tough lift. I'm sitting there tying my shoes, getting ready to go out for the field, and I'm like, hey, we almost done? And they're like, not even close, kid. So we proceeded to go out and do sled pushes and some plyometrics, and then we finished with Craig Fitzgerald was our head strength and conditioning coach, one of the craziest sons of bitches in college football. He's in the league now, but he's probably belongs in college football. Was one of the guys that could literally motivate you to go and die in a workout, but you'd be like, I'll go do it. So he had this godforsaken board, right? You know how most strength coaches have the timer on their hand for all the runs, and you know they'll give you they'll you know, some of them will give you the benefit of the doubt, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2,
2.
1. Nah, okay, you're good. Yeah, got it, right? Fitz had a board that was it had the time on it, and it started electronically and finished electronically with a loud horn. So there was absolutely no cheating sprints, right? At this point in time, my body is completely fucked. I'm cramping in my quads, my calves. I have 0 knee drive. We're running 300-yard shuttles. So half field, down, back, down, back, down, back.
Okay.
Right. And it was like we had already pretty much died. We had to run 2 of them. So I run the first one. He's got me running we had jets, bombers, and tanks, right? Usually the quarterbacks are in that bomber hybrid, run with linebackers, tight ends. He had me running with the jets.
Of course.
So I'm sitting there with Adrian Amos and Allen Robinson.
Yep.
I'm going boom, boom, right? Missed my first time.
You were trying to keep up with those guys?
Well, I don't know why I don't know why he put me there. It was probably one of those things to test me, right? So,
bro, I don't know if I would have been like, you know, trying to keep. I'd have had them pacing a little bit.
Listen, dude. So this is gonna get great. So I'm doing this, right? Boom, 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 boom. I missed by like a second, right? Don't think anything of it. Run my second one, make it, right? Make the time for my second one. So then Fitz calls everyone up. And I'm like, you know, basically an amoeba at this point. And he's like, all right, you know, good job, good job. Oh, yeah, by the way, Hack and Amos actually missed the first one as well. And a few other guys. All right, Hack, you know, Adrian, you owe me one. Missed your time. I'm like, what? Yeah, get back on the line. And here's the godforsaken board staring me down, right? So I'm like, all right. I'm like, I got to thug through this, man. I really got to harden up here. I got to get through this shit. So I start going, right? Down, back, down, right? Spin around, coming back. And I'm talking like, it looked like I was doing butt kicks coming back. Like I couldn't get my knees up at all. I get to the 50, 10, 9. I get to the hash, 4, 3. And I'm like right at the bottom of the numbers when it's going from 2 to 1. And I full on lay out, like lay out, roll on my right shoulder, full body cramp locks up, right? 1, Fitz starts giggling like a motherfucker. It's like, all right, you guys are good. Get off the field. I'm in a full body cramp locked up. The trainer comes flying over. Don't you ever dive again on your shoulder. You're going to hurt yourself. And I looked at him. I'll never forget this. I'm sitting there full body cramp like this. And I looked at him. I go, Tim, then you can run the next motherfucking one for me. I'm getting up out this bitch. So that was my college football moment. I crawled in. I'm laying in the shower, full body cramp, just like completely dysfunctional. And then I had to get back and ready to go. It was a Friday, so luckily I had the weekend to recover, and then I had to get back and do it again. But that was my welcome to college football moment, and I'm really thankful for it, to be honest with you, because you know as much as I do, those conditioning and summer lift days were always good character builders.
Yeah. So we off of the 300-yard shuttles, the one where it's 50 and back, there's an extra turn because you can do one that's 60 and back. Mm-hmm. And all summer we would train doing 50 and backs, and that last turn was always the one that rat fucked you. Like that last turn, you're turning like an old Chevy. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you can't no knee drive, so you think you're running fast, but you look like you're in quicksand. And we would do our conditioning test was 2 300-yard shuttles, but we would do a 60 and back on the conditioning test, so you felt like you were flying. So the only guys that would really miss it are the guys that were like woefully out of shape, because that one extra turn really gets you. We had a guy, I'm not going to name him. He got full body cramps as a freshman, and he's laying on the floor in the locker room on the way to the shower. Body seizes up. So now he's butt naked laying on the floor, and he loses bodily function and shits himself. And you can just imagine. You can imagine what we were calling him after that moment, and not because of the doo-doo pants situation, but he ended up transferring for another reason. Never made it. So my welcome to college football moment went like this. So we're in practice and we're doing a special teams period. The meeting that we had during training camp, like that day on special teams, was how Urban went to watch the Patriots practice when Mike Vrabel was still a player. Mike Vrabel was the defensive line coach for us this year. It's 2012 and 2013. He was there his 2012 season. So he's talking about how when he was down there, it wasn't just practice squad guys, and it wasn't just, guys who weren't going to make the team that were covering kicks during special teams periods, giving a look. He said Mike Vrabel went over there and snatched a scout team jersey from a guy and said, I'm going to give the fucking look because I want to make sure these guys are right. And he's giving us this whole speech about how the older guys got to be engaged and involved and give the young guys a look on special teams and how it's important as the edge in the game. So we're doing a kickoff return drill. So the scout team is the kickoff guys. And it's one of those where you're doing a drop to a certain area. You got to get your hips around. You got to sink and absorb, and then you got to start running your feet so you can clear out a path with proper leverage and all that shit. I am personally anti-sink and absorb because I feel like that is a way to get blown up. But that was what they were teaching at the time. We had evolved by the time I left Ohio State to you have to be running your feet before you make contact. Mm-hmm. So anyway,
doing this force.
Yes. So we're doing the sink and absorb. And my freshman year was it was a very soft and mushy year for the boy. I played on special teams. I rotated in a little bit on defense. I had no business playing. I was not tough enough for the college game at that point, fully admit. So I'm lining up to go get a rep on this drill. And before they blow the whistle, I look up. Ryan Shazier is running the scout because he really bought into this thing that Mike Vrabel and Urban were talking about him. You have to give the guys good look. So I'm like, fuck. All right. So I get into my deal. I drop. I'm sinking, absorbing. I think my technique is on point. I get ready to make contact with Ryan, and this sumbitch runs right through me. Dude, right through me, like no resistance at all. My legs flip over my head as I'm tumbling. I roll probably 2 times. I get up. Mike Vrabel calling me a pussy. Urban telling me I can't play football at Ohio State. And I'm looking at Ryan because we're both linebackers. We sit in the same position meeting room. I'm like, bro, I understand they told you to give a look, but you didn't have to rat fuck me like that.
How you gonna do me like that, bro?
Yeah, like my career could be over at this point because that was the nastiest thing I could have put on tape. And so that was my moment. I'm like, yeah, these boys ain't playing out here. Yeah. So I had a nice little wake-up call during training camp.
That's funny. I like the early ones. The early ones are usually good because, to your point, though, I bet you learned your lesson and now you knew how to do it. So
sink my hips and bring them with me when I make contact. How about that?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. No doubt. Well, this was fun per usual. A lot of good topics we covered. Some interesting action, specifically over there in the West. I think this is a obvious big week for Illinois. If they get this one, like I said, they only need one more and they're guaranteed a spot in Indianapolis. So we'll be looking out for that. But for Christian Hackenberg, the boy, I'm trying to think of a good adjective here. Sensational former Penn State quarterback. I'm merely Joshua Perry, and we'll be back at you next week.